Ever wonder why some organizations become household names, while others, despite promising starts, just, well, fade away?
Yeah, it's a really big question.
It's like a puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
with lots of pieces. And the ones that truly matter are often not what you'd expect.
Mm.
Today on the Deep Dive, we're going to sift through a collection of insights, really try to understand these surprisingly important elements that determine organizational success.
And what's fascinating is that while the reasons for success or failure can seem incredibly varied, there really are some fundamental principles at play.
Right.
Understanding these core ideas gives you a pretty powerful way to analyze any organization, from a tiny startup to a huge multinational corporation.
Exactly. And to guide us through this, we're taking a deep dive into the foundational concepts of management and organizational behavior.
Okay.
Our main resource is a comprehensive MBA-level textbook, actually created specifically for students in Thailand, which offers a really interesting perspective. We're also bringing in broader management ideas that apply, well, everywhere.
And if we connect this to your world, the listener's world, it's not just about having manager in your job title.
Definitely not.
Whether you're heading into a big meeting or maybe trying to get up to speed in a new field, or you're just kind of naturally curious. Understanding these basics gives you a quick but really solid grasp of how any organized group of people actually works.
That's the goal. We want to extract the key insights, those sort of aha moments, and show you how they connect to real-world situations
Yeah.
without getting bogged down in, complicated jargon.
Keep it accessible.
Exactly. We're looking at the whole picture today. Our sources cover, everything from the basic tasks of management and the inner workings of organizational behavior to different ways leaders lead, how teams function, what motivates us at work, how we communicate, make decisions, handle disagreements.
That's a lot.
Oh, yeah. Navigate change, the impact of culture, ethics, human resources, strategic planning, innovation, and even what's next for management.
And what's insightful there, I think, is how interconnected all these areas are.
Totally.
By looking at this wide range of topics, you start to see how they influence each other and ultimately contribute to whether an organization, thrives or struggles.
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive is clear: to give you actionable knowledge about how organizations operate, what makes them effective or, let's be honest, sometimes ineffective.
Yeah, too.
And to provide you with a framework for making sense of all the different forces at work. Okay, let's start at the beginning. What exactly is management? Our sources give us a couple of key ways to think about it.
Right. And what's insightful here is that while the idea of management might seem straightforward, it actually has a few different angles.
Okay.
One way to see it is as a process, the steps of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling resources. And importantly, with the aim of sharing information effectively.
Information sharing. Huh?
Yeah. And another perspective is that it's about social influence within structured systems, kind of guiding human activity towards common goals.
Right. And when we break down that process, we see those four core functions you mentioned. First, planning and organizing, both for the near future and the long haul. And crucially, figuring out how to use resources so the organization can be self-sufficient.
Self-sufficiency, yeah, that's key.
Second, leading, and it's emphasized that this means, setting an example.
Leading by example.
And finally, evaluating and controlling progress.
Yeah.
Checking how things are going.
And if we connect this to your understanding of the world, the text really stresses how vital management is. It shapes how people act within any organized group.
Any group.
Yeah, pretty much any organized group. And it guides the social forces that drive our economies. Without good management, organizations can easily become, chaotic and lose their way, eventually declining.
It's almost like a universal law, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our source material makes a strong statement that every organization, no matter what it is or where it exists, has some form of management principles at play.
Exactly.
That really highlights how fundamental it is.
Yeah, it really does. And it's not just about the actions themselves, but also how we understand management. It's a process, like we said, of reaching goals effectively and efficiently through people while using resources wisely.
Through people.
It's also a field of study, right? A body of knowledge with its own ideas, theories, principles. And finally, it's a vocation, a profession, the actual work that managers do.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me thinking about where management as we know it came from. Well, people have been managing things for ages. Forever.
Yeah.
The formal study of management is relatively new. It really took off in the late 1800s and then blossomed in the 20th century.
Yeah, that's right.
That makes it a pretty young and still evolving field, doesn't it?
It really does. And this newness is important, especially when we consider how organizations have changed. Today's larger, much more complex organizations, along with the ever-present role of technology.
Oh, technology, yeah.
They're constantly creating new challenges for managers.
And those future challenges sound pretty significant, right? Things like staying flexible, being agile as organizations grow, making sure information flows smoothly.
Which is harder than it sounds.
Definitely. Creating effective ways to reward people, aligning individual skills and, desires at a detailed level, and maybe most importantly, learning from mistakes.
Ah, that point about learning from mistakes is key. In a world that changes so quickly, the ability to adapt and improve based on what works and what doesn't. Well, that's a major advantage for any organization.
Okay, so we've got a bit of a handle on what management is. Now, let's dig into another core idea. Organizational behavior, or OB. What does this area really cover?
Well, what's insightful here is just how wide-ranging OB is. It essentially looks at all the factors, both inside and outside an organization, that can influence it.
All of them.
Pretty much. Inside, this includes everything from individual differences like personality and values to things like ethics, emotions, how we feel about our jobs.
Our attitudes.
Attitudes, behavior, yeah. And outside, it includes the organization's culture, its structure, its rules, the technology it uses, the overall workplace atmosphere, climate, and importantly, how it deals with change.
So it's a really comprehensive look at all the moving parts. And what's the main benefit of, understanding OB?
Well, if we connect this to making organizations better, understanding, and maybe even being able to predict how individuals, teams, and the entire system perform.
Performance, okay.
How involved and committed people are, how satisfied they are with their jobs, their overall well-being, and even their work-life balance. These are all key outcomes. This understanding is what makes organizational behavior effective in practice.
Our sources even touch on some really current areas of research in OB, like thinking about organizations as systems, focusing on what the market wants, the role of trust, and this interesting new cultural idea called harmony. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, this idea of harmony kind of came about when researchers noticed some unexpected patterns in data from different countries. It suggests that maintaining a sense of balance and agreement might be a particularly important cultural factor influencing how organizations work. The research also points to how our personal connections, our networks, can sometimes be biased. And it offers some interesting comparisons between organizations in Thailand and China, especially in the context of globalization.
That comparison is really interesting. It highlights that while some basic principles of how people behave in organizations might be universal,
Right.
the specific ways they show up and their impact can be different depending on the culture.
Exactly. At its heart, understanding OB is about studying why people in an organization act the way they do.
The why.
Yeah, the why. It's about how our thoughts, feelings, and actions as individuals and groups shape the values of the organization. The main goals are really understanding and prediction.
Yeah.
Predicting human behavior at work so that management can take appropriate action.
And the needs that OB tries to meet are pretty fundamental, right?
Yeah.
They involve the people who work there, the organizations themselves, and society as a whole, with a big focus on making how organizations operate more effective, especially by paying attention to the human element.
Absolutely. And there are some key theories that underpin all of this in organizational behavior. While our source mentions many, it highlights the expressive theory of emotions and the emergent theory of group emotion.
Okay, let's briefly explore those. What are the main ideas behind these theories, and why are they important?
Well, what's insightful here is that the expressive theory of emotions suggests that our emotions aren't just, personal feelings inside us.
Okay.
Instead, they are formed collaboratively. Kind of like our brains draw on a wide range of possibilities to create states that are relevant to things like deciding how to allocate resources or how well we're performing.
Relevant states.
Yeah, these relevant states then spread, creating shared understanding and eventually leading to group behavior.
So our emotions aren't just something we feel inside, but they actually play a role in shaping how groups work together, and even the outcomes of the organization.
Precisely. And the emergent theory of group emotion takes it a step further. It proposes that when a group's supporters collectively express their emotions, it acts like a basic plan, highlighting a common goal for the organization.
Huh.
Then, secondary emotional expressions influence how people interact locally within the organization, affecting the overall emotional atmosphere and potentially leading to significant collective change.
That's a really dynamic way to think about organizational behavior, less about individual actions in isolation, and more about the shared emotional landscape of the group.
Exactly. And while these newer theories might not directly explain, say, task performance in terms of output and efficiency, our source suggests they are more useful for understanding how engaged groups are, how well people are retained, the overall harmony of the workforce, and how effectively communities and networks are built.
Right.
It raises an interesting question, though. How do we actually measure these collective group feelings and understand their impact on how people behave in organizations?
Definitely something to think about. Now, shifting gears a little, let's talk about leadership. It's a topic everyone has an opinion on, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What key styles and theories does our material focus on?
Well, what's crucial to understand right away is that there's no single best way to lead.
Okay, no silver bullet.
No, not at all. How effective a particular style is really depends on the specific situation, the culture of the organization, and the level of leadership within that organization. However, our sources highlight transformational, transactional, and situational leadership as important frameworks to consider.
Let's start with transformational leadership. What's the main idea behind this approach?
Transformational leadership is really about inspiring change in those who follow. It's about boosting their motivation and performance by making their work feel more meaningful, offering them support, and helping them grow as individuals.
So more than just directing tasks.
Much more. Leaders like this are often admired and respected, and they can bring about really significant shifts within an organization.
And the way they achieve this transformation involves creating a vision, communicating that vision clearly, and then making it happen, turning that vision into reality, as our source describes it.
Precisely. There are 4 key parts to transformational leadership. Being a role model, that's idealized influence, inspiring others with enthusiasm, inspirational motivation.
Getting people excited.
Yeah. Encouraging new ways of thinking, intellectual stimulation, and providing support tailored to individual needs, individualized consideration. These leaders empower others, paint an optimistic picture of the future, encourage critical thinking, and offer personalized attention.
It sounds like a really powerful and potentially wide-reaching style, especially when an organization needs to make big changes or is facing, say, a crisis.
Absolutely. The source emphasizes that transformational leadership can have a profound and lasting positive impact on followers' motivation. It's essential for organizations that need everyone to agree on a new direction and for navigating urgent crises effectively.
Okay, now let's look at transactional leadership. How does that differ from the transformational approach?
Transactional leadership is more of a give and take relationship.
Give and take.
Yeah. These leaders tend to focus on the core activities that generate revenue for the organization and use rewards and punishments to guide their followers towards achieving specific targets.
So it's a more direct exchange, focusing on clear goals and measurable results.
Exactly. While this can lead to increased productivity in the short term, the lack of emphasis on collaboration and communication can limit how well the organization performs over the long haul.
Oh, okay.
It tends to work best in more traditional, bureaucratic organizations with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Fairness in these exchanges, though, is absolutely critical.
It sounds like transactional leadership is good for making sure basic tasks get completed, the stuff in the job description maybe, but maybe not so much for encouraging innovation or deep loyalty.
That's a key distinction. It meets the fundamental requirements of an employment agreement, but might not ignite the kind of passion and long-term engagement that transformational leadership can.
Finally, let's touch on situational leadership. The core idea here is that a leader's behavior changes depending on the situation, particularly how developed their followers are in terms of skills and motivation, right?
That's the central idea. However, it's important to know that empirical research hasn't consistently supported the effectiveness of specific leader behaviors suggested by this theory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. While the idea of adapting to your team members' abilities and enthusiasm seems logical, people often attribute a leader's style more to their personality, their disposition, rather than to a conscious adjustment based on the situation.
So even if leaders do change their approach in different situations, it doesn't necessarily mean those changes are the most effective way to achieve the desired outcomes. Or that people perceive it that way.
Precisely. And the source often concludes by highlighting the, well, often greater impact of transformational leaders who inspire with original and compelling visions. But this requires the leader to be highly motivated and persistent qualities that aren't easily taught or replicated, you know?
Right. It seems like moving towards a more transformational style of leadership is a key insight when we think about what makes leaders truly effective. Now let's move on to another vital aspect of organizational life: how teams work together and develop. Why is effective teamwork so important?
Well, effective teamwork is described as really valuable capital for any organization. Teams that function well have the potential to achieve remarkable results.
Huge potential.
Huge potential. But they can also fall short if their inner workings, their dynamics, aren't understood and nurtured.
So building a successful team isn't just a matter of luck. It requires attention to specific critical elements.
Yeah.
What are the key ingredients and dynamic forces at play?
The source highlights 5 key elements: clarity of purpose, understanding the context, open communication, a spirit of cooperation, and fostering creativity.
Okay, clarity, context, communication, cooperation, creativity. The 5 C's.
Kind of, yeah. And underlying these are 3 dynamic forces: a proactive, participative process, getting everyone involved, strategic probing, exploring options, and periodic priority setting, looking forward and back.
Those dynamic forces sound like they're constantly shaping and maintaining those 5 elements, keeping the team moving forward effectively.
Exactly. And understanding these forces allows for more effective management of a team's progress and participation. Now, teams don't just appear fully formed, right? They go through stages of development. What are the typical stages a team experiences?
Our material outlines a common 4-stage model: forming, storming, norming, and performing. Can you briefly describe what happens in each of these stages?
Sure. In the forming stage, the initial focus is on figuring out individual roles within the team and who's kind of in charge. Then comes storming.
Sounds ominous.
It can be a more challenging phase. This is where team members grapple with defining their purpose, goals, objectives, how they'll work together. Conflict often emerges here. Norming follows, where the group starts to settle down, become more cohesive, and establish its ways of working, its norms. Finally, in the performing stage, the team is functioning smoothly, efficiently, and can even handle disagreements constructively, focusing on the task.
It's interesting that this isn't always a straight line, and different team members might approach these stages in different ways.
That's a crucial point. Some people might prefer a clear, structured path, others might be more reactive, and some might even resist going through these stages altogether.
Resistors, huh?
Yeah. However, the source points out that all teams, even when people join or leave, will generally go through these phases. The amount of time spent in each stage, though, can vary greatly.
And understanding these stages can help leaders and team members anticipate potential challenges and maybe facilitate a smoother team development process.
Definitely.
Beyond these stages, what about the different roles that individuals play within a team?
Right. Different people bring different skills, knowledge, and, natural tendencies to a team, which naturally leads to them taking on different roles. Identifying and clarifying these roles can significantly improve a team's chances of success, especially when they hit difficult situations.
Our source even mentions 9 different team roles that can be grouped into 3 categories. It sounds like having a good mix of these roles helps create a team that's more effective than just a collection of individuals.
Precisely. It's about synergy. And it's not just about the formally assigned roles. Being aware of the unspoken agreements, the sort of hidden social contracts between team members, is also vital for successful teamwork as the team grows and changes over time.
Okay, so we've looked at how teams come together and how they function. Now let's delve into a key element that drives individual performance within those teams and organizations as a whole: motivation in the workplace. Why do people work? It seems like a simple question, but the answer is probably quite complex.
Oh, it is indeed. It's a complex blend of intrinsic motivation that comes from the personal satisfaction of doing the work itself.
Feeling good about the work.
Yeah. And extrinsic motivation, which comes from tangible rewards like salary, bonuses, promotions. Understanding this mix and how it affects work results is essential.
And the benefits of having motivated employees are pretty significant, aren't they? We're talking about People working harder, being more productive, having more positive attitude.
Higher quality work, too.
Right. Feeling more committed to the group and being more willing to learn and develop.
Absolutely. Research even suggests that when employees are properly motivated, the positive outcomes for organizations can be quite remarkable. However,
However,
yeah, the source cautions that motivating people isn't just about following a set of rules or putting elaborate organizational systems in place. Often, the effectiveness of these complex systems is, well, questionable.
it's almost like that analogy with teaching sometimes. The more complicated the setup, the worse the actual learning can be.
Exactly. Sometimes simple is better.
So if motivation is so complex, what's the value of studying motivational theories? Do they actually help?
They do. They provide us with frameworks for understanding why people behave the way they do, making it easier to identify the underlying drivers of their actions. They're also valuable for research and for, benchmarking motivational situations across different organizations.
Our material touches on a few important motivational theories, starting with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Can you give us a quick overview of that one?
Sure. Maslow's theory proposes that our needs are arranged in a pyramid. At the bottom are basic physiological needs: food, water, shelter. Then come safety, then social needs like belonging and love, then self-esteem, and finally at the very top, self-actualization, reaching your full potential.
And the idea is you have to satisfy the bottom before you worry about the top.
Generally, yes. The idea is that we need to satisfy the lower level needs before the higher level ones become our primary motivators.
Okay. Then there's Herzberg's two-factor theory, which talks about hygiene factors and motivators. How does that theory work?
Herzberg suggested that certain aspects of the work environment, which he called hygiene factors, things like job security, pay, working conditions, company policies,
The basics?
kind of the basics, yeah. These can cause dissatisfaction if they're not adequate. But, crucially, even if they're good, they don't necessarily lead to satisfaction or motivation.
Huh. Interesting.
Motivators, on the other hand, things like achievement, recognition, the work itself, responsibility, advancement, these are what actually create satisfaction and drive motivation.
So for managers, this means they need to fix the things causing dissatisfaction, the hygiene factors,
Yeah.
and design jobs to include things that motivate the motivators.
Exactly. It's a two-pronged approach. You need to remove the negatives and add the positives.
And finally, we have behavioral theories, like Thorndike's law of effect,
Yeah.
focusing on how consequences shape our behavior.
Right. The law of effect basically says that if a behavior is followed by a satisfying outcome, we're more likely to repeat it. If it's followed by an unpleasant outcome, we're less likely to repeat it. Simple, but powerful. It highlights the role of consequences in shaping our actions.
So when it comes to actually motivating people in the workplace, it sounds like it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach, is it?
Absolutely not.
What motivates one person might not motivate another at all.
Exactly. People have different preferences for how they're rewarded. While we often think of money as the ultimate motivator, that's just not always the case. Our source points out that some employees are primarily driven by money, others by non-monetary factors like recognition or challenge, and some by a combination of both.
And understanding these individual differences is crucial for managers to tailor their motivational strategies effectively. Tangible rewards for some, intangible for others.
Precisely. To create effective, personalized strategies, managers really need to pay close attention to how each employee responds to different situations and then adapt their actions accordingly. Like what? Well, for example, publicly acknowledging someone's achievement might be highly motivating for someone driven by monetary rewards or status. But someone motivated by other factors might appreciate, say, an opportunity for professional development, or maybe just a quiet thank you and knowing their work contributed to team learning.
That level of individual attention to motivation seems key to getting the best out of employees and keeping them satisfied. Okay, let's move on to something that's essential for all organizational activities. Communication. We often hear that good communication is vital, but making it happen effectively in complex organizations, that can be a real challenge.
It really can. And what's insightful here is the understanding that while having the latest communication technology, the hardware, is helpful,
Sure.
the actual content of our communication, the software, if you will, and understanding the unique culture of the organization are just as, if not more, important for improving how we work together through communication.
Our source emphasizes the need for clear thinking, especially deductive reasoning, as the foundation for better communication. It seems like many managers maybe don't have a strong system for ensuring that reports and discussions are accurate and easy to understand.
That's a key point the material makes. Reports that are too long contain irrelevant details, use obscure language. Well, they just make it hard to grasp the key information.
Yeah, I've seen those reports.
Haha, haven't we all? The source recommends using systematic analysis, providing brief weekly updates on important developments, keeping things concise, and cutting down on unnecessary, frivolous communication.
And beyond the structure and content, there's just so many things that can get in the way of effective communication. Our material groups these into personal, psychological, organizational, cultural, and even environmental barriers. Let's touch on a few of those.
Okay. Personal barriers can include things like attitudinal issues, lack of confidence, maybe aggression or fear, perceptual differences based on our backgrounds, different life experiences.
How we see the world is differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even our language choices and communication styles, formality, pitch, volume can lead to misunderstandings.
And psychological barriers.
Those involve our emotional states, like feeling apathy or anger, maybe personal issues affecting our mood or attention. Interestingly, how well the sender prepares their message can also be a psychological barrier for the receiver. And just simple attention issues, lack of time, focus, energy.
Organizational barriers might be related to the company's structure, right? Like
Yeah.
different departments working in silos.
Yeah, structural issues, departmental barriers, managerial styles, or just process-related problems, lack of integration, unclear authority, poor discipline in communication.
And cultural barriers seem especially important in today's global world.
Hugely important. Differences in dialects, terminology, how we frame things, our worldviews, variations in language, nonverbal cues, even how direct people are expected to be. Think low context versus high context cultures. Even expectations during negotiations can differ based on culture.
Recognizing all these different barriers is the first step towards overcoming them. So, what are some practical things organizations can do to improve their communication?
Well, one key strategy is to clearly communicate the organization's vision. This gives everyone a sense of direction, a North Star, but it needs to be reinforced consistently through various channels, presentations, newsletters, meetings, intranet, ensuring the message is clear and reaches everyone.
And stays consistent.
And stays consistent, yes. Another important aspect is creating a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up. Moving beyond overly formal manager-employee relationships and encouraging more open, candid, informal communication.
Like water cooler talk.
Sometimes those informal settings, like cafeterias or break rooms, can actually be better for honest conversations than formal meetings, yeah.
Encouraging two-way communication is also essential, right? Not just broadcasting messages.
Absolutely. Basic techniques like making eye contact, paying attention to nonverbal cues, body posture, gestures, facial expressions, these are very effective, especially in informal interactions. It's about active listening and adaptive responses.
And of course, technology. Using tech can help teams that are spread out communicate more easily, email, video calls, chat.
Definitely. But there's a caution there, too. It's important not to let the sheer volume of tech-enabled communication drown out thoughtful research, analysis, and clear communication. Avoid the noise.
Good point. Finally, regularly checking in on how employees perceive communication. That sounds important.
Yeah, using things like focus groups or surveys every couple of years. And crucially, sharing the results and developing action plans for units or areas where communication is rated poorly. Closing the loop.
So, clear and consistent messaging, a supportive culture, active listening, thoughtful use of technology, and getting feedback. They all play vital roles in building effective communication within an organization. Okay, let's shift our focus to another core management function, decision-making. Managers make decisions constantly, and those decisions can have a really big impact.
They really can. What's insightful here is that a manager's decisions are often described as unique due to their, intensity, difficulty, complexity, and potential impact. Experienced managers often develop certain patterns or, rules of thumb for making choices.
And these decisions happen at different levels.
Right. Generally, they fall into individual decisions, group decisions, and those that are kind of shaped by the organization's history and practices, the way things have always been done.
Our source discusses two ends of a spectrum when it comes to how decisions are made, intuitive versus rational. Can you explain the difference?
Sure. In high-pressure situations, maybe with uncertain information and potentially significant consequences, think of a surgeon in an emergency.
High stakes.
Very high stakes. Managers often rely on intuition, a gut feeling, a sudden understanding without consciously going through all the logical steps.
Okay.
On the other hand, rational decision-making is a more step-by-step, fully conscious process where each stage is carefully considered. This type of decision-making can sometimes even be computerized or programmed, like following an algorithm.
It sounds like most decisions in the real world probably involve a mix of these two approaches, depending on the situation and the information available.
Exactly. Very few decisions are purely one or the other. When we look at the types of decisions managers face, it's clear that different levels within an organization deal with different kinds of choices. A CEO might decide on the overall budget, a project manager on getting assistance for their team, a technician on how to repair equipment.
So different scopes.
Different scopes, but ultimately, a decision is a choice made from several alternatives, often when there's uncertainty and when different people or groups have different goals and preferences.
And these differing goals and preferences, even within the same organization, can create significant challenges for decision makers, no matter how good their intentions are.
Absolutely. The economic consequences of the same outcome can be very different for different parts of an organization or for different individuals, leading to conflicting viewpoints on the best course of action. It creates obstacles.
Now, let's explore decision-making models. These provide frameworks for understanding how organizations make choices.
Yes. These models often focus on how managers assess the level of uncertainty and ambiguity associated with each possible decision. Making optimal decisions is generally seen as an iterative process.
The iterative.
Yeah, meaning it repeats. It involves several steps. First, clearly defining the problem. Second, searching for possible solutions or alternatives. Third, carefully deliberating or considering those options. And finally, choosing the option that seems most likely to improve the situation.
And this process of making decisions can get better over time, right? As we make more choices and learn from the outcomes, gather more information, it's not just about a single calculation.
Precisely. It's a continuous refinement. The source highlights that an economic decision, particularly in production, might be better understood as choosing how much effort to put in, rather than just picking a set of inputs. It's a rational choice between acceptable alternatives, taking into account both how effort is distributed and the inherent uncertainty involved.
The decision-making model outlined includes specifying criteria, generating alternatives based on feasibility, deliberating on the utility or value, and then enactment, putting it into action.
Yeah.
However, our source also points out that in reality, decision-making is often more intuitive and less structured than these models might suggest.
That's a key insight. Choices are often made and then reevaluated based on various implications and constraints as they arise, making the process more fluid and less like following a strict algorithm.
So while decision-making models provide valuable frameworks for thinking about choices, actually making decisions often involves a more nuanced, perhaps messier, and intuitive approach. Now, let's move on to another area where managers frequently have to navigate complex situations: conflict resolution and negotiation. These are essential skills, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely essential. Disagreements, clashes within organizations are common. They might not always escalate into outright fights because organizations usually have shields.
Shields.
Yeah, things like protocol, policy, hidden expectations, the overall culture. These things can dampen open conflict. However, when conflicts are ignored or unaddressed, they can lead to underlying frustration and low morale, what the source calls phantom conflict.
Phantom conflict, I like that term. So to effectively address and resolve conflict, it's crucial to understand different approaches. Our material suggests a model based on how cooperative and how assertive someone is, leading to 5 common styles: collaboration, competition, avoidance, accommodation, and compromise.
Right. These styles really revolve around finding a balance between assertiveness, focusing on your own needs and concerns, and cooperation, considering the needs and interests of others. While these styles are generally applicable everywhere, specific cultural contexts can influence how they are perceived and used.
And when it comes to negotiation, which is obviously closely linked to resolving conflicts, what key techniques are highlighted?
The source identifies 7 basic negotiation tactics and also offers advice on how to deal with negotiators who may be less competent. It emphasizes 2 broad approaches: cooperative bargaining, which aims for a win-win outcome where both parties benefit.
The ideal, maybe.
Often the ideal, yeah. And competitive bargaining, where the parties see each other more as rivals trying to get the biggest piece of the pie. Effective negotiators often need to integrate skills from both approaches.
Let's delve a little deeper into those 5 conflict management styles. Can you briefly describe each one?
Sure. Competing is high assertiveness, low cooperation focused on winning, sometimes at the other's expense. Collaborating is high on both assertive and cooperative, aiming to find a solution that fully satisfies everyone.
Takes effort, I bet.
It does. Compromising is in the middle on both dimensions, seeking a quick, mutually acceptable solution where each party gives up something. Accommodating is low assertiveness, high cooperation, prioritizing the other person's needs over your own. And avoiding is low on both trying to sidestep or postpone the conflict altogether.
It sounds like the best style to use really depends heavily on the specific situation, how important the issue is, how important the relationship is.
Precisely. It's about choosing the right tool for the job. And when we look at negotiation techniques, some key elements include building good relationships, clearly stating expectations, actively seeking those win-win solutions, exploring compromises, keeping an open mind, being realistic, controlling your emotions.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Definitely. Being patient, ending on good terms if possible, putting agreements in writing, and crucially, always acting ethically.
Ethical considerations are so important in negotiation, aren't they? It's not just about getting the best possible outcome for yourself.
Absolutely not. It's about maintaining trust and acting with integrity. While the scope for negotiation can vary based on factors like organization size and supplier relationships, these fundamental ethical principles should always guide the process.
Okay, we've covered how to navigate disagreements.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about something that's a constant in today's rapidly changing world. Change management. Transforming an organization from where it is now to where it wants to be. That can be a really complex process.
It's not just complex, it's become, well, unavoidable. Due to rapid shifts in technology, globalization, markets, you name it. Change is no longer the exception, it's the norm.
So true.
Managing organizational change involves diagnostic analysis, understanding the current state, and intervention, understanding the components, leading to a change program. Often there's a change agent involved to help guide the process.
And figuring out what makes some change efforts successful while others fail. That's a key part of the field of change management, right? Our source talks about understanding change at different levels of depth.
Right. At the basic level, it's about applying common best practices, the what to do of managing change. But at a more sophisticated level, it involves understanding the intervening variables, the why does change take place, the factors that really determine success or failure.
To truly understand organizational change, you need to be familiar with various concepts, different definitions and perspectives on change, the role of change agents, why planned changes succeed or fail, why people resist change.
Resistance is a big one.
Yeah. What makes change efforts successful, the influence of power dynamics, and how people make sense of change.
Exactly. And successful change management often depends on having certain key characteristics, understanding the qualities of effective change leaders, and identifying the critical success factors for positive change within that specific organization.
Our material also categorizes the different situations that call for organizational change, like when an organization is declining, during planned evolution, reacting to problems, or maybe emergent change based on sensing shifts in the environment.
And the fact that change management has emerged as a distinct field of study in recent decades really reflects the growing awareness of how crucial it is for organizations to adapt and thrive. It draws on knowledge from many areas: organizational design, strategy, mergers, implementation, communication, leadership.
So what are some of the key strategies for effective change management that our source highlights?
It emphasizes the importance of considering both hard factors, things like project management, timelines, structures, and soft factors, which are more about leadership, people skills, culture. Both are critical.
Hard and soft.
Yep. The source introduces the 6 C's for managing the softer aspects of change: communication, concern, addressing stakeholder needs and input; capability, ensuring people have the necessary skills; collaboration, commitment, and compensation, addressing potential losses or downsides.
And it suggests addressing them in that order. Communication first.
Ideally, yes. Communication is foundational, explaining the why, what, how, the goals, the data, then addressing concerns, building capability, fostering collaboration, gaining commitment, and finally dealing with compensation or loss issues.
So these 6 C's are all about making sure everyone involved understands the change, feels heard, has the necessary skills, works together, is committed, and feels that any potential negative impacts are addressed. Communication seems absolutely vital.
Absolutely. Seeking input from stakeholders, especially middle managers who often play a key role in implementing change, is also crucial. The source also mentions 4 C's related to strategies change agents can use and 2 C's that deal with overcoming resistance.
It sounds like a very thoughtful and comprehensive approach to navigating the complexities of transforming an organization. Now, let's turn our attention to something that deeply affects how management is done: cultural influences. In today's interconnected world, this is more important than ever.
What's insightful here is recognizing that in today's global economy, especially for multinational enterprises, having a cohesive strategy across all operations is essential.
Makes sense.
And developing this strategy requires considering the organization's culture, its ethics, top management's role, how decisions are made, because management itself is deeply shaped by the culture and environment in which it operates.
Culture, defined as those shared values and beliefs of a group, strongly influences how we think, feel, and behave, often in ways we're not even consciously aware of, right?
Yeah.
It provides a common understanding.
Exactly. It provides order, a framework. Successfully implementing a strategy requires understanding how the target culture and various functional cultures interact. Mergers, in particular, require careful attention to potential cultural clashes and managing the integration of newly acquired organizational cultures.
Our source also discusses the idea of cultural leverage, emphasizing how critical understanding organizational culture, which reflects long-held values shaping member behavior, is for the long-term success of multinational companies.
And 2 processes, routine and normalization, can moderate or lessen the impact of culture. Once routines become established, repetitive actions become standardized and tend to resist change. Cultural routine acts like an organizational repertoire.
But competition can shake things up.
Right. Strong competition can drive the acceptance of radical new ideas, especially information-based innovations, even if they challenge existing routines.
To really understand organizational culture, our material draws on an anthropological viewpoint, defining it as a learned, shared, transmitted way of life. It includes conscious and unconscious thoughts and actions, surface elements like symbols and behavior, and deeper dimensions like basic assumptions. Shine's model helps break this down.
Yeah, Shine's model is really useful. It suggests that basic underlying assumptions about reality, human relations, human nature form the foundation of an organization's culture. These influence the more visible elements like values, general abstract guides for thinking, and norms, specific measurable guides for behavior. The basic assumptions are often unarticulated, just taken for granted.
Finally, when we talk about cultural dimensions in management, we're looking at factors that influence observable behavior and help us understand and predict consequences.
Right.
Like a framework for national culture's attitudes.
Exactly. These dimensions exist in society, derive from collective experiences, and affect norms about how managers should behave and what people expect from them. They're incredibly useful for understanding why cross-country negotiations or collaborations might succeed or fail, often due to mismatched cultural profiles.
So the basic framework includes management qualities like decision and communication styles, and management tasks like goal setting and feedback.
Right. Each group has several dimensions. Managers everywhere perform similar tasks, but they are readied differently by these varying cultural dimensions. Each dimension is like a continuum. Think centralization versus decentralization, or simplicity versus detail and planning.
And different countries fall at different points on these continuums.
Yes. Management culture, these cross-national differences, significantly influences organizational style. Understanding it enables much more successful cross-national cooperation.
Okay, we've navigated the complexities of culture. Now let's talk about a fundamental aspect of responsible management: ethics in management. It's about more than just following the law, isn't it? It's about doing what's morally right.
That's a key distinction. Business ethics is rooted in moral philosophy, providing normative or prescriptive guidelines for conduct good, bad, ought, taught not. Ethical norms guide our behavior. Then there's descriptive ethics, which just looks at actual human behavior and standards to understand what people do believe is right.
Our source points out that business has always been a topic of moral concern. And with increased scrutiny of corporate actions lately, there's a growing interest in business ethics and ethics in management.
Definitely. However, a true commitment to ethics and corporate social responsibility is perhaps rarer than we might hope or expect.
That's a big concern.
It is. Striving for these ideals is possible and desirable, but when failures occur, we really need to critically examine the choices made at all levels: cultural, individual, organizational, societal. There's work being done to delineate what ethical managerial performance looks like, though some argue ethics is only attractive if it aligns with self-interest.
Ethics in business sets the principles and standards guiding behavior, right? helping organizations avoid pitfalls and shaping relationships internally and externally. Organizational codes of ethics provide a framework.
Yes, though our personal values shape our initial sense of right and wrong, organizations develop these codes, often written documents, to govern employee performance, define acceptable behavior, and guide relationships with all stakeholders: customers, suppliers, regulators, shareholders, the community. They provide standards for consistent decisions.
But these codes can sometimes be idealistic, presented in a vacuum. And trust often plays a huge role, especially in risky deals.
Exactly. Trust, often based on emotional understanding and fear of breach, can be crucial when formal codes don't cover everything. To help navigate complex ethical dilemmas, those stressful situations where the right answer isn't clear, ethical decision-making frameworks can be very valuable.
How do they help?
They help individuals and organizations discern ethical boundaries, decouple moral arguments from purely economic ones, and provide criteria to formulate, test, and justify responses. Our source outlines several theoretical approaches: consequentialist, focusing on outcomes; deontological duties rules; justice, fairness rights; and virtue, character integrity, each with different implications for accountability.
And a decision maker might use one or combine several.
Yes, considering equity and accountability, there isn't always one single right ethical answer. It often involves weighing different principles.
Right. Ethical decision-making is a thoughtful process. Now, let's delve into what many consider the most crucial part of management: human resource management, or HRM. Our source suggests that the successful development of an organization often lies in the hands of its HRM function.
What's insightful here is the emphasis on employees not just as resources, but as distinct, essential assets. People with feelings, thoughts, creativity, the drivers of innovation, future vision, market presence, brand image.
So much more than just cogs in a machine.
Absolutely. HRM itself is defined as the process of acquiring, utilizing, crediting, rewarding, retaining, and discharging efficient and effective employees to achieve organizational productivity, survival, and development. It improves both employee and company efficiencies.
The importance of HRM in the 21st century is increasingly recognized, isn't it? Success is often linked to the quality of human resources.
Definitely. Ongoing training and development are necessary for a more educated workforce to contribute effectively. And it's not just about money. Monetary rewards aren't the only key.
What else does HRM do?
Well, it helps determine what constitutes best job performance, design jobs to meet both employee and organizational needs, ensure people have the required knowledge, skills, and abilities, KSAs, develop training to address issues like turnover, absenteeism, low morale, conflict, and inform employees about policies, procedures, job characteristics, and performance expectations. The source specifically notes the significance of HRM development in Thailand.
Two key functions within HRM are recruitment and selection. Can you explain the difference?
Sure. Recruitment is the process of pursuing and identifying qualified individuals, creating an applicant pool. Selection is then identifying the most suitable person from that pool after evaluation.
So finding them, then picking the best one.
Basically, yes. These are fundamental for meeting organizational needs and attracting the right fit. Recruitment affects the number, characteristics, and quality of applicants. It's an ongoing process, often involving internal and external searches.
Best practices require both corporate processes and unit-specific initiatives.
Right. Critical success factors include organizational input, attractiveness of the company, and the recruitment activity itself. Performance management is another vital HRM function.
Yes, performance reviews and all that.
It's more than just the review. It's a formal process requiring commitment from both managers and employees. It's like a two-way agreement for mutual commitment to an agreed strategy, similar to a marketing strategy.
You need a baseline first, right?
Yeah.
Often that's unclear.
Exactly. Establishing baseline performance is crucial. And it's an iterative, cyclical process that really needs the right organizational norms and culture in place before you even develop the system. The goal is both immediate and long-term improvements.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of our deep dives. Let's touch on strategic management. Our source emphasizes how necessary it is for getting that holistic view of management.
What's important to understand is that strategic management involves assessing the external and internal environment, defining a mission and objectives, developing a strategy, putting that strategy into action, implementation, and then evaluating how well it's working. It's broader than just strategic planning or decision analysis.
And the strategic planning process itself.
It deals with long-term objectives and action plans for survival and success. Managers examine the current state, analyze advantages, identify opportunities and problems, and develop plans. It requires appraising trends, economic, competitive, technological, analyzing strengths and weaknesses, considering resources, estimating external conditions.
It's like a lot of analysis.
It is. It involves top management decision-making for strategy formulation, evaluation, selection, implementation, and sometimes restructuring. It encompasses the decision processes, the strategies chosen, and the means of implementation, monitoring, and adaptation.
What tools help with the strategic analysis?
Several key tools. Analyzing the general environment, looking at macroeconomic factors and technology, understanding industry structure, famously using Porter's 5 forces.
Rivalry, buyer-supplier power, new entrants, substitutes.
Exactly. Analyzing competitors' direct and indirect rivals. Understanding competitive dynamics, how strategies and responses shape competitive advantage. And assessing strategic resources, physical, human, financial, etc., often using the VRIO framework.
VRIO.
Value, rareness, inimitability, and organization. It helps assess if a resource provides a sustainable competitive advantage.
These tools provide a systematic way to understand the landscape and the organization's position. Now let's talk about something that drives progress: innovation and change.
Right. Innovation is described as a process developing new products, processes, or services with significant positive societal impact. It requires a motivating, supportive environment and culture. Invention itself is complex, long-term, emergent learning. The focus here is usually on organizational innovation.
It's a process from idea to market production.
Right.
Applying technology to a need.
Yes. Development takes an idea and makes it transferable to production. Factors influencing this include the internal environment, like R&D, and external factors, like information dissemination. Decisions are often made using vertical or parallel models, focusing on the most promising or least uncertain paths.
And fostering innovation is vital for long-term success.
Absolutely. It helps improve performance, efficiency, earnings. It requires a well-thought-out plan and discipline management for large and small firms alike. It's increasingly important due to competitive pressure.
But it's becoming more difficult, especially in large organizations.
Studies suggest successful innovation is rarer than we might think. Research looks at what fosters innovation, obstacles, success-failure factors. Some firms once seen as innovative become conservative. New, nimble firms often emerge, especially in high tech. There's a proposed structure-process context model for fostering innovation.
And managing change initiatives is also crucial, as we discussed earlier. Change happens for internal or external reasons. Employees respond differently.
Yes, they go through stages: awareness, comprehension. Resistance might stem from unawareness, denial, or protecting the status quo. Later stages involve recognizing the need, considering pathways, but maybe with fear or skepticism. Progress requires addressing concerns, clarifying expectations. Support is needed as roles, skills, culture change.
A comprehensive plan is needed for buy-in. Change often starts with high dissatisfaction, perceiving the status quo as unacceptable.
Right. And senior management should avoid creating unnecessary change just for show. Global trends often have the biggest impact. Change initiatives impact customers and employees.
Finally, let's briefly touch on global management practices and the future trends. The global economy necessitates changes.
Definitely. Globalization shrinks the world, intensifies connections, easy access to distant markets, immediate interaction. Many businesses are now global. Exploring complex management practices and cultural adaptation is vital.
What are the underlying principles for global business?
Adaptation, information, market knowledge, free markets. These hold across countries. Large markets offer opportunities but require adapting to local conditions, economic development, living standards, infrastructure. Specific consumer response info is needed for local value adaptation.
Information is challenging, but a competitive advantage.
Yes. Early market discovery is key. Market knowledge, what products, processes will be accepted, is essential. Adjusting successful strategies has high transaction costs. Tacit knowledge of successful multinationals is hard to emulate. Language nuances, cultural interpretation are significant barriers, though global media creates some convergence.
Adapting to global markets means opportunity and risk.
Always. New customers, sales, profits, but dangers too. Need to assess the environment. Industries once thought impervious face foreign competition. Knowledge of languages, customs, buyer behavior, competition, distribution, pricing, promotion is required. How do companies enter foreign markets? Different modes: direct exporting, using intermediaries, direct investment. This determines control, speed, risk. Intermediaries for personal goods, slow, low risk. Direct exporting for small equipment, better risk control but marketing burden. Each has pros and cons.
And cross-cultural management is key here.
Yes, studying behavior in organizations in different cultures. It's part of international management, which covers all functions cross-nationally. Cross-cultural management is a microcosm focusing on behavior. Research often categorized by themes like strategy, HR, leadership across cultures.
Okay, and case studies are useful for illustrating these principles.
Very useful. MBA classrooms use success stories, motivation, quality, and cautionary tales of failures. Analyzing successes like Aloha Airlines crisis management or failures like the NASA Challenger disaster provides powerful lessons about teamwork, communication, culture, ethics, decision-making. Ignoring rivals' decline can lead to similar failures. Malpractices fueled by rigid compliance often backfire.
We need a macroscopic view, not rely on single theories. So looking ahead, what are the future trends in management?
Influenced by sociocultural and technological factors. Trends crystallize into inevitabilities. Managers need to understand management within these societal forces. In Thailand, for instance, engagement with ICT will disrupt work e-learning, web-based project management. Internet's impact will grow. Control is harder without internet tools. Competition may change. Developed country issues become relevant knowledge work, new organization forms.
Management needs new definitions beyond the cybernetic planning, organizing, implementing, controlling.
Potentially. We need to understand how combinations of systems, personalities, situations produce behavior. Technology's impact is huge. Internet, mobile, social, fundamentally changed work and interaction.
Oh.
Revolutionized collaboration, transformed work relationships, work from anywhere, weakened time-space constraints, new task organization. This has profound, often unanticipated implications for management. We need to adapt, imagine new practices for new organizational forms. Communication is transformed multiple modes beyond face-to-face. Managing these systems is key. Existing structures may need simplification or abandonment. Managing digital appearances, work-life balance, learning new norms, all part of it.
And emerging management practices focus on innovation.
Yes, business practice innovation is a prime focus for competitive advantage. New, hard-to-imitate practices spreading through networks. New theories emerge related to asynchronous simulation, neurocognitive learning, interorganizational risk management. Studying factors influencing workplace practice innovation is critical.
Finally, our source notes it's tailored for Thai MBA students, considering their background and using relevant examples.
Yes, assuming English literacy and basic management skills, but potentially lacking formal prior management education, so basic concepts are introduced. Organizational behavior was a pioneering elective at Thammasat University's MBA program, meeting a need for a fresh approach.
Okay, so to recap for you, the listener, today's deep dive has explored, well, a huge amount. The fundamental principles of management, the complexities of organizational behavior, the importance of adaptive leadership, how teams develop and function.
The drivers of motivation and effective communication, the processes of decision-making and conflict resolution, the necessity of managing change well, the significant impact of culture.
Ethical considerations in business, the basics of human resources, the process of strategic planning and its tools, what fuels innovation, and the emerging trends that are shaping the future of management. Phew.
Haha. Yeah, it was a lot. But if we connect this back to why you tuned in, you hopefully now have a more comprehensive understanding of these core ideas. We've aimed to provide insights and practical takeaways that are relevant whether you're facing immediate professional challenges or simply satisfying your curiosity about how organizations tick.
And as we've seen, this was really a concentrated exploration of a vast and ever-evolving field. There's always more to learn, always more to discover.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to consider. Reflecting on the rapid changes in the global landscape, the continuous advancements in technology. What do you believe is the single most critical challenge that leaders will face in the coming decade? And how might the principles we've discussed today inform their approach to tackling that challenge?
Something to ponder. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.